Her son made a joke about her dying, filmed it, posted it, tagged her. Martha Caldwell didn't respond. She rewrote her will, moved her money, and circled his name in red. By winter, the house he'd mocked her in was sold under a name he'd never find. By spring, the video had gone viral, for all the wrong reasons, and when he finally broke into the safe, all he found was a candle, and a single line, "You joked." I remembered. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The knife slipped through the sponge layers like it was nothing. Strawberry filling bled out onto the porcelain plate, a soft sigh escaping from the moist crumble as Leah cut with forced precision. Martha's name was spelled out in clumsy blue frosting, slightly tilted, the A missing in Martha, as if someone had rushed it last minute. The dining room was warm with late morning sun. Leah had opened the patio doors to let in fresh air, but all it let in was the faint chemical whiff from their landscaper's leaf blower, 2 yards over. Martha sat at the end of the long farmhouse table, oak faux distressed, her back to the kitchen. Her chair creaked when she shifted. No cushion. No one offered one. "I'll grab champagne," David announced, brushing past her like a breeze. He was already in the fridge before anyone could decline. The bottle popped a second later, his voice high and showy. "Only the best for the birthday girl." It wasn't bad champagne, but it was the kind that whispered, "You didn't matter enough for real Dom." Leah brought out the cake next, carrot store-bought. The candles had already been lit, dripping tiny pearls of wax down to the piping. "Make a good wish, Mom," she said sweetly, holding her phone just high enough to angle down at Martha's face. That's when David leaned over, one hand under the glass cake stand. He grinned like a man delivering the punchline of a speech he'd been rehearsing all week. "Wish hard," he said. "You might not make next year." The words landed louder than they should have, not because of the volume, but because of the stillness that followed. Even the leaf blower stopped. Or maybe it didn't. Martha couldn't tell. Her ears were ringing with a kind of sterile heat, as if the blood had rushed straight to the surface of her skin and was waiting for permission to boil. She looked around the table. Sam flinched first, eyes down, then flicking up at her, then away. Leah giggled awkwardly and turned back to her phone. Her other hand reached for the knife to start slicing. "Just a joke, right?" David said, still smirking. "Come on, blow 'em out." Martha inhaled quietly. The candles flickered, tiny flags in the middle of war. She blew them out with a flat, slow puff. Her lips barely moved. No one clapped. There was no singing. Only the sound of plates being set out, forks clinking, and the muffled buzz of the fridge trying to stay cold. David topped off the champagne like a bartender on autopilot. Leah handed out napkins with practiced precision. No apology, no acknowledgement. The laugh had been casual, throwaway. The kind of jab you tell yourself was harmless until the bruise blooms days later. "Sam, get a slice for Grandma," Leah said, gesturing with the cake knife. "I'm good," Martha said quietly. Her voice barely carried, but Sam heard. His eyes met hers for a split second. Soft, unsure, then swallowed by teenage restraint. David had already moved on to a conversation about his new condo rental in Charleston. "We're thinking about a winter spot. Somewhere with light," finally he said to no one in particular. Leah clinked her glass against his. "Manifesting, baby." Martha excused herself 20 minutes later. Claimed she needed to check the basement pipes before it got too cold. Leah offered a half-hearted drive safe. David didn't look up. She didn't drive straight home. She stopped at Mount Hope Cemetery, parked near the pond and sat in the car for 10 minutes with her keys in her lap. Her breath fogged the windshield faintly. 73. One candle away from the end if David's joke was prophecy or warning. The next morning, the light through the linen curtains looked different, sharper, meaner. Martha padded barefoot to her home office and opened the bottom drawer of her walnut desk. The will sat inside a thick envelope labeled in her own tidy handwriting. "Estate documents. Current." She pulled it out slowly, almost reverently. The paper had weight, the kind lawyers like to print on. Inside was David's name, David Eugene Caldwell, next to the words primary beneficiary. She grabbed a red pen from her desk organizer, the kind she used when she was a financial analyst, double-checking junior staff reports, and she circled his name, once, twice. Then she capped the pen, slid the document back in, and sat very still, staring out the window as the autumn wind twisted yellow leaves across her backyard like confetti from a party no one came to. The building hadn't changed in 15 years, but Martha noticed the bulbs in the lobby were colder now, clinical, almost surgical. Fitting. She pressed the elevator button with the side of her knuckle and caught her reflection in the brass panel. Crisp wool blazer, pearl studs, no lipstick, the kind of presentation she'd once used to negotiate seven-figure portfolios. Today, it would serve another kind of calculation. Ellie Strickland's office sat on the 10th floor, corner window, lined with maple shelves and old trial photos in silver frames. The scent of leather-bound contracts and orange spiced tea greeted Martha before Ellie even stood up. "Marth," Ellie said, rising, her voice always half smoke, half laugh. "You look like someone who just buried a body or found the shovel." "I'm here for a different kind of excavation," Martha replied, dropping her bag on the seat beside her. "We need to strip him out surgically." Ellie paused, one brow lifting beneath her silver blonde bangs. "You want to remove him entirely?" Martha unbuttoned her blazer, folded her hands in her lap. "No, I want him to feel what I felt at that table. Belittled, unchosen, laughable." Ellie leaned back, pulled a legal pad toward her, the corner already curled like a page halfway done. "Then we give him hope. Not money, hope." Martha tilted her head. "Go on." "Delayed revocable disinheritance," Ellie said slowly, pen scratching the words down in blue ink. "He remains technically in the will, but under a clause, one triggered only by, say, genuine contrition, specific acts of reparation, no timeline. So I stay alive in the clause." Martha murmured. "Until he proves he sees me." "Exactly. And when he doesn't, he gets nothing." The tea kettle whistled from the back credenza. Ellie poured 2 mugs, placed one in front of Martha without asking. Orange peel and cinnamon bloomed into the air. Martha sipped and exhaled. "I want it airtight. No challenge. No loopholes. If he sues, he loses. We'll layer it." Ellie nodded, now full emotion, tapping keys, pulling folders. "We'll restructure assets into a conditional trust. Tax-sheltered. Charitable adjacency. Some gifts only activate posthumously. Others are locked until criteria are met." Martha watched her oldest friend with quiet gratitude. Ellie didn't ask why. Ellie never had to. "Make it poetic," Martha said. "If he ever truly sees me, he'll see the clause." Ellie paused, typing, and looked up. "You always had the cleanest revenge instincts." "He wanted me to vanish," Martha said. "Let's give him something to remember instead." The next hour unspooled like a final draft. Ellie toggled between documents and estate maps, confirming valuations, projected tax burdens, eligibility for family deduction exclusions. They laughed once when Ellie suggested a line in the trust titled, "In the event of entitlement." "Too petty?" Ellie grinned. "Not petty enough," Martha replied. At one point, a heavy truck rumbled past on the street below, rattling the window pane. The vibration stirred the chain on Ellie's desk lamp, which clicked softly against the ceramic base. Neither woman flinched. Martha signed 3 preliminary drafts. Ellie notarized them with her signature purple stamp. As she gathered the pages, Martha noticed a framed photo on Ellie's bookshelf. 1978. The 2 of them in pinstripe suits, holding cigars and martinis, barefoot on the beach at that conference in Florida. 35. Fierce. "We knew our worth back then," Martha said, nodding at the photo. Ellie glanced over. "Still do. That's why you're here." Outside, the sky had turned the color of raw steel. Stormlight gathered at the horizon, But Ellie's office glowed warm, defiant. Martha stood to leave, smoothing the front of her blazer. He toasted my final year. Let's start planning his final payout. Ellie slid a fresh folder across the desk, her red nails tapping it once for emphasis. This will gut him worse than his joke did. The printer coughed once before it began, as if even the machine knew the weight of what it was spitting out. Martha stood over it, hands steady, breath shallow. The smell of warm toner curled into the air, mixed with the faint citrus cleaner she used that morning. Outside, the wind dragged dry branches across the window pane like fingernails over a coffin lid. 3 pages slid out. Thick bond, watermarked, official. Her name at the top, her signature at the bottom, the clause in the middle like a loaded trap. Legacy reversal clause, any inheritance allocated to David Eugene Caldwell is revocable upon evidence of moral negligence, documented ridicule, or failure to demonstrate remorse for behavior that results in emotional harm to the testator. It was dense legal language, but Martha had insisted the tone be sharp. Cruelty, remorse, revocable. Words that bit back. Ellie had included a cover letter with the draft. You can burn the old will, but I recommend you bury it instead. She'd written, let him think he's safe. Martha didn't burn it. She filed it in a box marked Taxes 2014-2017 and slid it deep under the basement stairs, just in case David came sniffing. He always assumed old women misplaced things. Let him assume. She laid out the new will on her kitchen counter, the granite cool beneath her palms. Using her old Mont Blanc pen, black lacquer, gold trim, a gift from her late husband, she signed each page with precise loops and hard pressure. No hesitation. Then she ran each page through her laminator. The machine hummed with quiet finality. A faint plasticky scent floated up, sealing not just the paper but her resolve. When the last sheet cooled, she slid it into a cream folder and wrote in sharp black ink, a state directive, updated, do not discard. Next came the safe. Hidden behind the linen closet's lowest shelf, the wall panel popped loose with a slight tug. Inside, a steel fireproof lockbox and a tidy stack of documents, home deed bond certificates, power of attorney. She placed the laminated will on top, then sat back on her heels, breathing through the hum of the house. The furnace kicked on below. Pipes clicked in the walls. Outside, someone's dog barked once, then again. Her phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. A message from Everything's filed. Your power is legally yours to wield. If he sues, you're shielded. If he grovels, you decide. Martha texted back. Either way, he learns the cost. Then she added, without meaning to, of careless cruelty. Later that evening, Sam stopped by. No warning, just his quiet knock on the back door. He smelled like fresh rain and old library books. Always did. She opened the door and gave him a look. You walked. Bike. Got a ride halfway. Dad thinks I'm at Daniel's. He sat at the kitchen table while she reheated stew. He didn't ask for anything, but she gave him bread, butter, a ceramic mug of apple cider. I saw the video, he said, not looking up. Martha's hands paused on the dish towel. I figured. I told him to take it down. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and, he laughed, said people need to lighten up. Martha didn't answer. She didn't need to. Sam understood silence the way other people understood screaming. You're not gonna forgive him, are you? I don't plan to waste my forgiveness where there's no request for it. Sam nodded slowly. Good. They sat in silence, broken only by the occasional clink of his spoon against the bowl. When he was done, he rinsed everything and placed it in the dishwasher without being asked. As he pulled on his hoodie, he hesitated. If something ever happens, I mean, you know. You're okay, right? Martha gave him a long look. Sam, I've never been more okay in my life. He left through the back again, silent as he came. She watched until his outline disappeared into the neighbor's hedges. Back inside, her phone buzzed again. David. One image. A cartoon tombstone with R.I.P. Common sense scribbled on it in Comic Sans. Caption, saw this and thought of you. Martha stared at the screen. Then she walked back to the linen closet. opened the panel and ran her fingers along the sealed document like it was a blade waiting to be unsheathed. The cobbler was still warm, wrapped in a linen towel, and cradled on the passenger seat like a newborn. Martha had used her good dish, the deep navy ceramic one, with the crackled glaze, not the disposable aluminum tray. Leah had suggested for easy cleanup. The house smelled like candles trying too hard. Some mix of cinnamon apple and fake evergreen punched her in the face the second she stepped inside. Leah's voice floated from the kitchen, chirpy and hollow. "Oh good, you made it. Just in time, we're plating." The dining room table gleamed under pendant lighting that cast everything in an Instagram-filtered glow. 6 settings, bone-white porcelain, brushed gold flatware, except for the extra place setting near the end. There, a collapsible card table hugged the corner with a single folding chair. A plastic fork waited beside a paper napkin, with a watercolor turkey printed on it. "Mom, can you put the cobbler over there?" Leah gestured vaguely toward the sideboard, already stacked with store-bought pumpkin pie, boxed brownie bites, and a tub of whipped topping. Martha didn't move right away. "I brought real whipped cream too," she said, but no one responded. At the main table sat Leah's parents, Harold and Janice, already sipping white wine. Janice barely looked up from her phone. Harold nodded like he was tolerating a neighbor's dog barking. David clinked glasses with them, and said something about quarterly returns. Martha placed the cobbler gently on the sideboard. No one offered to help. "Dinner," Leah sang, like a cruise director. Sam appeared last, hoodie still on, earbuds dangling around his neck. He glanced at the folding chair, then at his grandmother, his mouth pulling tight. "Mom," David said, lifting his phone. "Smile. Look at you, still hanging in there." He snapped the photo before she could react. The flash lit her face like a mugshot. No one laughed this time. Sam looked like he might say something, then didn't. Martha sat at the folding chair. The metal bit into her back. The plastic fork cracked slightly when she pressed it into the overcooked green bean casserole. Conversation drifted around her like fog. Property taxes, someone's golf swing, Leah's mother's bunion surgery. No one asked her about anything. Not her garden, not her book club, not the new porch swing Robbie helped her install. She listened, she chewed, she waited. And then she stood. "Everything okay, Mom?" Leah asked, only half turning from the sink. "I just remembered something I need to take care of tonight," Martha said, wrapping the cobbler back in the towel. She hadn't touched a bite. David didn't even look up. "We're saving room for cake anyway," he said. Sam opened his mouth. Martha gave him a slight shake of her head. "Not now." She left through the front door this time, closed it softly. Not a slam. No performance. Just silence. Outside, the air was sharp, chilled with the bite of early frost. Her breath came out in steady puffs. Porch lights flickered on down the street, automatic as affection had become in that house. She drove home with the cobbler still warm beside her, the whipped cream untouched. The house greeted her with familiar quiet. The walls didn't press in like Leah's did. Her couch didn't need to be stylish. It just needed to hold her. She made tea. Chamomile. No sugar. No honey. She sat by the window, the cobbler cooling untouched on the counter behind her. The next morning, she filled out the donation form by hand. Black ink, slow strokes, beneficiary. Aging with Dignity Alliance donation amount $25,000. Gift purpose, General Operating Fund note. In honor of women who eat alone without shame. She sealed the envelope, kissed the corner, not out of sentiment, but punctuation, and placed it on her front steps for Robbie to drop off at the post office. Inside, her folding chair sat tucked in the garage, dusty but functional, just like her. The bank vault door hissed open like a tomb. Cold air rushed out, brushing against Martha's cheeks as if the past itself were exhaling. Inside the safety deposit box, everything lay untouched. Her late husband's coin portfolio, bundled in velvet sleeves, deed records for the beach cabin in Kennebunk Port, handwritten ledgers with her initials still crisp in fountain pen ink. Ellie stood beside her, clipboard in hand, legal folders stacked like bricks between them. No one ever asked about these, Martha murmured, running her fingers over the coins, buffalo nickels, silver dollars, and one Liberty head she'd pulled from her father's desk in 1961. They were in your maiden name, Ellie said. Technically, not even David could have subpoenaed these without digging 3 layers deep. But after today, she pulled out a new file. They'll vanish. Legally, permanently. Martha nodded once. The vault light buzzed above them like a gnat stuck in amber. They drove straight to Ellie's office. After, the windows looked out over downtown Rochester, gray with February haze streaked by rain. Martha signed each document with unwavering pressure, her name looping in tidy cursive, like an old signature from a love letter. The annuity was reassigned to the blind trust. The main cabin title, transferred. Even the coin portfolio was assigned a cultural artifact designation under a donor-advised clause. In short, nothing David could touch. Nothing he even knew existed. Ellie looked up as she clipped the final file shut. You want to keep the house in your name. Martha glanced out the window at the blurred skyline. Her voice was steady. No. I want him to see a for sale sign, and know it's not for him. Ellie gave a small satisfied smile. You've always had a gift for poetic cruelty. It's not cruelty, Martha said. It's clarity. That evening, Robbie Tran knocked on her side door, wiping his boots before stepping in. He smelled faintly of sawdust and eucalyptus soap. She liked that about him. Clean, precise, unobtrusive. The kind of man who didn't fill silence with words just to feel important. I've got the lock specs and access key, she said, handing him a small brass envelope. If I'm out, just come in through the back. Start with the garage and basement. Work your way up. He took the envelope with a nod. Want me to patch the front steps too? You'll get more eyes with good curb. Do it like you do your own, but don't make it too nice. She gave a small smirk. I don't want him imagining family cookouts. Robbie laughed under his breath, then glanced around the house. You okay packing everything alone? Sam's coming tomorrow. He knows what to keep and what not to ask about. Robbie nodded. You sure you want the listing to go public? It won't, she said. Ellie's handling it through the trust. Alias title, filtered inquiries. It'll never hit Zillow. The next afternoon, Sam arrived with his sleeves rolled up and eyes sharper than his years. They packed for 4 hours, wrapping crystal in newspaper, labeling boxes with decades of memories. At one point, he held up an old photo of her and her husband on a sailboat, hair whipping, both laughing mid-sentence. Keep or toss? He asked. Keep, Martha said, touching the edge of the frame like a bruise. They moved through closets and cabinets, stacking what mattered and silently discarding what didn't. Sam never asked why she was doing it. He already knew, just before dusk, as they finished taping the last box labeled Sheena, storage, the doorbell rang. Martha wiped her hands and opened the front door to find David on the porch, hands in his pockets, smug grin already forming. Hey, thought I'd drop by. Saw Robbie's truck, figured something was up. Martha didn't respond. His eyes flicked past her into the foyer, at the half-filled boxes and bubble wrap. Thinking of selling? He asked casually. You know I'd want first dibs. Martha ran her fingers over the polished walnut banister one last time before the photographer arrived. The stairs still creaked on the 3rd step from the top, just enough to let you know the house had a spine. The living room smelled like lemon oil and lavender from the diffuser Robbie had insisted on plugging into the corner outlet. It worked. The air felt lighter, cleaner, almost expensive. You sure you want to stage it with the old rocker? Robbie asked, adjusting a velvet pillow on the accent chair beside the fireplace. Martha glanced at the oak rocker, its curves worn smooth by 50 years of use. It's not old, she said. It's historic. He chuckled and kept fluffing. He'd brought in fresh tulips from the market, yellow, her favorite, and set them in a mason jar on the kitchen island. The rooms glowed with warm neutrals, well-placed mirrors, and throw blankets folded like promises. When the real estate photographer knocked, Martha welcomed her with a firm handshake and a request. No wide-angle trickery. Let the rooms breathe the way they are. The woman nodded, efficient and polite. A cannon hung from her neck like a stethoscope. Over the next hour, she moved through the home in deliberate silence, capturing sunlight on floorboards, the sheen on the copper sink, the weathered brick above the hearth. Martha watched from the hallway, arms crossed, not anxious, just exacting. That evening, David dropped by again, unannounced. She should have expected him. The scent of fresh paint and lemon oil would have wafted across the whole street. Finally trading up, he asked, stepping into the foyer like he still had claim. Took you long enough. I'm just exploring options, Martha replied evenly, wiping a smudge off the entry mirror with her sleeve. He wandered through the kitchen, eyes on the light fixtures. Looks better without all your clutter. Might actually be marketable now. Before she could respond, Leah's voice floated in from the porch. Ooh, we should Airbnb it. Keep it in the family. Sam could manage it during school breaks. Martha's jaw twitched, but before she could speak, a voice cut through from the top of the stairs. It's not yours. Sam stood 2 steps down, hoodie sleeves pulled over his fists. His face was unreadable, but his tone had weight. Leah's smile froze, glassy and defensive. I didn't mean it like, yes you did, Sam said, turning back upstairs without waiting for an answer. David shrugged. Teenagers. Always looking for some injustice to latch onto. Martha let the silence stretch. Let them feel its shape. Can I help you with anything else, David? She asked finally. He blinked, thrown for a beat. Nah, just checking in. Then thanks for checking. He left through the front this time. Leah lingered for a few seconds, then offered a brittle smile and followed. Later that night, Robbie returned and installed new deadbolts on all 3 exterior doors, keyed to a code only Martha, Sam, and Ellie would know. He removed her valuables from the upstairs cedar chest, photos, war bonds, old jewelry, and stored them in a fireproof safe at his place until the transition was complete. You trust me with this stuff? He asked, double-checking the latch on his truck. You don't gossip, Martha replied. That makes you more trustworthy than half this zip code. When she finally sat down with her tea, the house didn't feel like it was being packed up. It felt like it was being preserved, documented at its highest worth, frozen in dignity. At midnight, she received a text from Ellie. Listing goes live at 9 a.m., alias Westbridge Equity Holdings. He'll never find it. Martha looked around her living room one last time. He had called it dated. She called it mine. And now, thanks to a clever veil of paperwork and a trusted few, it had become temporarily priceless. The smell of brown butter and cardamom drifted down the block like a rumor. Martha adjusted the linen napkins on the patio table one final time, turning each fork exactly perpendicular to the plates. The garden around her bloomed wild and honest. No symmetry, no forced topiary. Lavender, coneflowers, sweet mint gone a little rebellious. She wore her Sunday blue, the vintage silk blouse, with pearl buttons and tiny embroidered violets at the collar. A soft breeze curled up the back of her neck, lifting the edges of her silver hair as if the morning were whispering its approval. Jazz drifted from the record player inside. Ella Fitzgerald, low and golden, the lemon curd sat in a ceramic bowl at the center of the table, its surface shining like the yolk of a perfect day. Ellie arrived first, arms full of peonies and legal gossip. Your front lawn looks smug, she said, stepping into the sun. Martha smiled. It knows something the neighbors don't. Robbie followed a few minutes later, in pressed khakis and a navy polo, balancing a tray of warm cheddar chive biscuits. He gave her a nod that said more than words. Sam rolled in last, bike helmet swinging from one handlebar, hair a mess, grin crooked. Did I miss the jazz hour or the food part? You missed the prep and the pleasantries, Martha said. Right on time. They gathered at the long farmhouse table Martha had dragged out from storage, refinished with a coat of light walnut stain and waxed until it gleamed. The food spread looked like something out of a magazine. Fresh scones still steaming, quiche with tomato and basil, berry compote in a glass pitcher, carafe mimosas. The lemon curd took center stage, flanked by the biscuits and still warm banana bread. Holy crap, Sam whispered. Why weren't these the family brunches? Because these aren't for people who post memes about tombstones, Ellie said, raising an eyebrow. Martha poured coffee. Let's not dirty the dishes with names. Robbie passed the biscuits around. The scent of rosemary and cheddar drifted through the patio. Bees hummed lazily over the marigolds near the porch rail. Somewhere down the street, a sprinkler sputtered to life. Midway through the meal, as Sam wiped lemon curd from the corner of his mouth, he looked up at her, serious for one. Do you think they'll ever find out? Martha sipped her tea, eyes fixed on the horizon. They'll find out, she said. When it stings, that's the point. Ellie leaned back in her chair, glass raised. To blowing out candles she grinned, and blowing up egos. They clinked glasses, laughter filled the garden, not sharp or showy, but full, lived in. Then Robbie stood, reached into his messenger bag, and pulled out a long, narrow box. Something small, he said. Figured you've been cutting through a lot of nonsense lately. Martha opened it slowly. Inside lay a cake knife, polished silver, the handle etched with clean block letters, still standing. Her fingers curled around the handle like it had been waiting for her. She didn't smile, not fully, but her eyes shimmered. She traced the engraving once with her thumb, and closed the box. Sam was the first to clap. Robbie stayed quiet, but his posture straightened. Ellie winked behind her teacup. Martha stood slowly, looking at the three of them seated around her table. Sunlight dappled across their faces. She saw not a family by blood, but one by boundary, by choice. A small, defiant army of the uninvited. She took a breath. The jasmine vines on the porch fluttered behind her. Then somewhere deep in her purse, her phone buzzed. A notification. She picked it up. One new tag. Instagram. Leah Caldwell Enway had posted a photo, blurry and bright, of Martha blowing out birthday candles. The caption read, "She always loved attention. #Throwback Thursday, #Drama Queen Moments, #Family First." Martha stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds. The garden suddenly a little too still. Then, without a word, she placed the phone screen down on the table, lifted her champagne flute and finished what was left in one sip. The ping came just after 7 a.m., sharp and shrill. Martha, seated at the kitchen table with her morning paper and half a grapefruit, glanced down at her phone as it buzzed once more. David Caldwell Tech had tagged her in a video. Her thumb hovered over the notification like it might burn her. Then she tapped. The clip played instantly, 16 seconds long. A tight shot of her at the head of the table, eyes sunken in candlelight, lips barely parted. The moment she blew out the candles, her hand trembled slightly. David's voice, off camera, "Wish hard, ma. Might be your last puff." Then a burst of champagne laughter. Cut. The caption read, "Birthday baddie. Might be her last puff. LOL. #mama moments, #dark humor, #survivor energy." It had over 300 views already. 32 likes. A stream of laughing emojis flooded the comments. A distant cousin from California wrote, "Oof, David Savage." Another one added, "Y'all are wild. She okay though?" Martha set the phone down with surgical precision. The morning light broke through the windows in clean slats, landing across the hardwood like a verdict. Footsteps barreled into the kitchen. Sam, disheveled, hoodie half on, phone in hand. "Did you see it?" His voice cracked. "He actually posted that. Who does that?" "I saw it. He doesn't even see how disgusting it is. Like it's funny to mock you. And people are sharing it. Like it's God. He's a walking cartoon of himself." Sam ran his hand through his hair and paced, unable to sit. Martha reached for her reading glasses, slid them on and opened her email draft. The screen glowed calmly against her unbothered expression. To Ellie Strickland, subject. Clause trigger message. Trigger activated. She hit send, then turned to Sam. "Sit down," she said softly. "Have some grapefruit." You'll give yourself an ulcer before 17. Sam shook his head, jaw clenched. What are you gonna do? Nothing rash, she replied, folding the paper in half. But something permanent. Minutes later her phone dinged again. Ellie, then it's official. Clause invoked. Reversal locked. 6 words. 6 nails in a coffin. David never saw being built. Across town David's morning was a blur of dopamine. Notifications flying in. Comments stacking. He stood in his kitchen in joggers, sipping protein shake foam, while laughing at his own caption. Leah, mid-mascara, glanced at the screen. You think she saw it? David shrugged. She'll survive. She always does. Barely. Leah smiled, unsure. Maybe archive it later. Your sister already texted me. Said it's a bad look. David waved her off. People love edgy. Nobody cries over candle jokes. Trust me. He didn't see the alert from his Ring doorbell camera 2 hours later. A manila envelope, delivered by courier. White gloves, no signature required. By then Martha was back in her garden, pruning the hydrangeas with slow, thoughtful snips. The wind teased her hair again. A mockingbird chattered from the elm. Everything felt in its place. Inside the envelope, David received that day. Certified notice, notification of will adjustment subject, David Eugene Caldwell conditional disinheritance trigger. Executed, his name bolded. His inheritance recalculated. He dropped the document once, thinking it a joke, picked it up again, read it 4 times. His smoothie warmed on the counter, untouched. He arrived unannounced again, not with a bouquet or apology, but with a folder in one hand and his phone in the other. Storm cloud expression, mirrored sunglasses, and a smugness he mistook for composure. Martha was in the garden, pruning roses. The air smelled like cut grass and distant rain. She wore her sun hat and gloves like armor. Robbie had mowed the lawn that morning. The edges were crisp, the mulch fresh. Her yard looked serene, unbothered. Unlike David. Is this some kind of joke? He barked, stepping onto the brick path, his sneakers crunching grit with each angry footfall. Martha didn't flinch. She snipped a bloom with surgical precision, then dropped it into the steel bucket beside her. I assume you're referring to the certified notice. You received it? Oh, I received it. He snapped. Along with half a dozen texts asking if I'm being disinherited. Is that what this is now? A PR stunt? Martha removed her gloves, set them gently beside the bucket, and reached into her apron pocket. She handed him a folded sheet of paper, printed on high-gloss stock. David looked down at it. His own social media post. The video still. Her face frozen mid-breath. His caption. The comments. Might be her last puff, he read aloud. Incredulous. This, you're blowing up our family over this? Martha's voice was level. Crisp. No, I'm blowing it up over the pattern. That post was just the ribbon on the box. David's jaw clenched. You'd ruin my future over a laugh? No, she said. You did that. He let out a half laugh, half snort. Jesus, Mom, you always were dramatic. You loved being the center of attention. Don't act like this is new. The garden went quiet. Even the birds seemed to retreat. Martha's expression didn't change. She simply folded her hands in front of her and looked him square in the eye. I loved being included. That's not the same. Behind them, Leah appeared from around the hydrangeas, her heels wobbling slightly on the uneven stone path. Her blouse was a little too pristine for yard work, her lipstick still intact. Okay, let's just breathe for a second, she said. This is obviously extreme. He didn't mean it. You know David. He jokes. It's how he copes. Martha turned to her. Then he should have started meaning things sooner. Leah blinked. You're talking like you're never changing it back. Martha didn't answer. She turned and clipped another rose. David's voice dropped low and venomous. So what? I get erased because I made a bad joke? No, Martha replied without looking up. You get erased because you made me the joke. He stepped closer, his body rigid, voice raised. I have kids to think about. A mortgage. Retirement plans. You think charities and a few neighbors deserve your money more than your own son? Yes, she said. David froze, just for a second, a blink of disbelief. Then his face twisted. You've officially lost it. You're 73, living alone, hiding things in linen closets, rewriting legal documents based on feelings. This is nuts. I had the will reviewed and filed through 3 independent legal channels. Martha replied calmly. But if you'd like to formally challenge it, you're welcome to try. He laughed darkly. Don't tempt me. Leah put a hand on his arm. David, he shook her off. No, she wants a war? Fine. I'll call Spano. We'll file a mental capacity challenge. Maybe she's not as sharp as she thinks. Martha turned back toward the roses. Make sure he's good at losing. Later that week, David sat across from a scowling estate attorney and laid out the situation. When the lawyer asked for evidence of cognitive decline, David showed him the Instagram video. The attorney watched in silence, then said, flatly, "This is your exhibit." David nodded. "It's part of the pattern." The attorney set the phone down. "You might want to rethink that. A judge could interpret this as elder mockery, not mental incompetence." David's face paled. The summons came folded in cream cardstock, nestled in a FedEx envelope, like it was something dignified. It wasn't. It was desperation dressed in a blazer. Martha unfolded the letter slowly. Legal headers, dense blocks of type, impersonal phrasing that boiled down to a single accusation: cognitive decline. David had filed a formal petition to contest her mental competence. Ellie was already waiting at the kitchen table when Martha called her in. No preamble, just a worn legal pad, a laptop, and a pen that clicked like a loaded chamber. "He's going this route," Ellie muttered, flipping through the petition. "That little bastard. He thinks the mind goes where the body slows," Martha said, setting down a tray of coffee and shortbread. "He's mistaking quiet for decline." "Well," Ellie leaned forward, "then let's remind him who trained analysts at Chase before he even had his first email address." That afternoon, the calls began. Ellie assembled affidavits like a tactician marshalling troops. Dr. Connolly, Martha's longtime internist, signed off with glowing praise. "Sharper than half my med students." 2 of Martha's former team leads from Manhattan submitted notarized statements attesting to her leadership, her portfolio decisions, her memory for decimal point precision. One of them ended his letter with a simple line. She once caught a 6-cent discrepancy on a $400,000 report. Blindfolded. In heels. Ellie even contacted Judge Wexler, now retired, who recalled Martha's advisory work during a local finance fraud audit. "She didn't just keep up," he wrote. "She led the room." Then came the evaluation. Neutral psychologist. Court approved. Martha showed up in a deep green pantsuit, hair tied back, brooch at the collar. The office smelled like Lysol and too much mint. The psychologist, a 30-something with kind eyes, greeted her with professional detachment. They began with memory recall, word association, pattern analysis, logic tests. She passed everything. But when the evaluator asked her to interpret a proverb, "Don't count your chickens before they hatch," Martha smiled. "I'd say, don't count on inheriting something you didn't earn." The woman didn't flinch, but her pen stopped moving. Back at home, Sam waited in the living room. He stood as Martha entered, eyes wide. "Well?" he asked. "I submitted my resume," she said, unbuttoning her blazer. "I'd say the position is secure." 3 weeks later, the ruling arrived. The court sided decisively in her favor. The judge's remarks were scathing: no credible evidence of diminished capacity. The respondent demonstrated clarity, recall, and emotional self-control far exceeding courtroom expectations. Petitioner's claims are speculative, self-serving, and border on harassment. In other words, David lost. Hard. Worse, the judge issued a reprimand for wasteful litigation and ordered David to cover all legal fees, his and hers. Ellie called her first. "You just cost him about 20 grand. Consider it tuition," Martha replied, "for a lesson long overdue." The next day, Sam stopped by with a milkshake in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. The Rochester Ledger had printed a small summary of the case in its civic disputes column. He handed it to her. "Grandma," he whispered with a smirk. "That was epic." Martha sipped the vanilla shake and nodded. "A little strategy never hurt a candle wish." Sam laughed. The mail arrived just after noon. Among the catalogs and circulars was another envelope, this one from Ellie. Martha slid it open and unfolded the document. "Cease and desist. Effective immediately, David Caldwell is prohibited from initiating further litigation or making unauthorized inquiries into the status of the estate. Violations will result in additional penalties." Signed, stamped, delivered. She folded it back up, placed it in her desk drawer behind the laminated will, and shut it gently. Let him fume. Let him boil. She didn't need to silence him. Legally, the system already had. The video remerged on a Thursday. Not as a meme, not as a joke, as a headline. "When the laughs hurt" viral clip sparks new conversations around elder humiliation, posted to a widely read personal blog called Family First Not Last. Martha hadn't even heard of the site until Sam texted her the link at 6:42 a.m. "Grandma, you need to see this." They found it. By the time she clicked through, the post had already gained traction, shared on Facebook groups, circulated in retirement advocacy circles, and retweeted by a handful of elder rights attorneys across the Northeast. The article was searing, empathetic. Not once did it name her, but it didn't need to. There's something deeply cruel about the way some adult children treat their aging parents, not with physical violence, but with public ridicule dressed up as banter. The woman in this video, stiffly blowing out candles as her son jeers, doesn't flinch, but you can see her internal silence like a thundercloud. The embed was there. Low res, shaky, but undeniably David's video. The post was time-stamped with the same caption, "Might be her last puff, LOL." Except now beneath it, the internet didn't laugh. It roared. Comments poured in. "Who films their own mother like this and posts it? You handled that with class, ma'am. This is abuse, and people don't even recognize it because it's dressed up as humor." The way she just quietly blows out the candles, heartbreaking. Martha scrolled slowly, one hand on her tea, the other steady on the mouse. She hadn't cried, not even at the brunch, but now tears pricked at her eyes, not out of grief, but recognition. Someone saw it. They finally saw it. Across town, David's morning began with 3 missed calls and a panicked voicemail from Leah. "You need to check Twitter. Now." He clicked open the article. His face went hot, then cold, then hotter. He rushed to his account, found the video still up, and hit delete without blinking. Too late. Screenshots flooded Reddit. Someone had archived the original post in the Wayback Machine. It was cited in a think piece by a nonprofit leader in D.C. that afternoon. A lawyer in Albany quoted it during a panel on elder dignity laws. The internet had spoken. David paced their living room like a man walking out a fire that no one else could see. "It was a joke," he kept muttering. "I do this kind of stuff all the time." Leah stood by the window, arms folded tightly across her chest. "It's making us look heartless, David. My Pilates group already saw it." Nora said it gave her the chills. "Then Nora needs a Xanax," he snapped. But when he turned around, Leah wasn't laughing. "She looked humiliated in that video," she said. "Not haha embarrassed, humiliated. You don't even see it, do you?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. That Sunday, the fallout reached pew level. The Caldwells always sat center right, 3rd row. This time Sam stood at the back doors, headphones tucked into his hoodie pocket. When David waved him over, Sam shook his head once, then slid into a seat in the last row alone. Pastor Green gave a sermon on the parable of the prodigal son. When he said, "Sometimes the one who stays home does the most damage," David stiffened. After the service, the crowd filtered out, whispered hellos, brief smiles. One congregant patted Martha on the arm and said, "Saw you in that piece. You held your dignity better than most of us ever could." She nodded once. That was the goal. Later that evening, Martha checked her email. The subject line stood out instantly. Nomination: Elder Advocate of the Year, National Alliance for Aging with Dignity. The message was brief, but potent. You've been nominated for your grace, strength, and unwillingness to accept humiliation as a birthright. We would be honored if you would accept. She sat back in her chair, the house around her dim and peaceful. Outside, a wind chime danced faintly in the breeze. David thought silence meant regret, but Martha's silence wasn't surrender. It was the hum of machinery, legal, methodical, irreversible. The morning after the elder advocate nomination went public, she met Ellie in her office downtown. No hugs, no pleasantries, just brisk business under warm lamplight and sharper eyes. Ellie handed over a revised document in a slate leather folder, her red pen already tucked behind her ear. Final split. Last revision window. You sure about the percentages? Martha scanned the summary again, her finger pausing on each line. 60%. Sam Caldwell. Unconditional 20%. Charitable entities. Aging with Dignity Fund. Monroe County Meals on Wheels and Girls Who Code. Rochester Chapter 20%. Personal beneficiaries. Eleanor Strickland, Robbie Tran, and 2 longtime friends from her investment days. And beneath it all, a final clause. Quiet. Lethal. Article v. the Legis. Legis Adjustment Authority. The testator reserves the right to revoke any beneficiary allocation without notice or explanation, should said party exhibit behaviors inconsistent with respect, empathy, or loyalty. This clause is self-executing and irreversible upon invocation. Ellie looked up. It's ironclad. He couldn't untie it with a crowbar. Martha didn't smile, but her shoulders, always squared like a soldier's, softened just enough. He kept waiting for an apology, she said. I kept revising the trust. That evening, Martha received an email from David. The subject line read, "Let's talk like grown-ups." She opened it only because she expected exactly what she found. Mom, I know things have gotten tense. I'm sorry if my post came across as cruel. That was never the intent. I was just trying to be funny. Maybe it landed wrong. Maybe we all said things we didn't mean. But this legacy mess is putting a wall between us, and it doesn't need to. I hope we can reset. Let me know when we can talk. David Ellie read the message from across the table and snorted. Groveling, wrapped in ego. Timing too clean, Martha said, clicking delete. He saw the article. He saw the fallout. He's not sorry. He's exposed. Ellie raised her glass of club soda. To the clause he laughed into existence. Martha lifted her tea. Let him wish he'd make it to the next reading. 2 days later, Robbie knocked at her front door with something large strapped to a dolly. I found it at an estate auction in Syracuse, he said, wheeling in a chest-high antique safe. Green enamel, brass dial, scrolled legs, gleaming from careful polish. Had it restored, added a few reinforcements. Across the front was a custom-etched brass plate. Legacy secured. Martha circled it like it was art. You always did have a flair for the symbolic. Robbie chuckled. You want it in the den? No, she said. Right here. She gestured to the center of the living room, where a Persian rug framed the open floor between wing-back chairs. Statement placement. They bolted it down that night. No pomp, just Robbie with a drill and Martha with her copy of the trust. Inside, she placed only one item, a manila envelope labeled in her own hand, with slow, deliberate letters. David, final draft 40 voided share, do not open, unless entitled. She closed the safe door with a final click, the metal cool and smooth beneath her fingers. Robbie stood beside her, silent. Funny thing about inheritance, Martha said, brushing her hand across the brass plate. People think it's owed. They forget it's offered. He waited until she was distracted. Laughter carried through the garden windows, low and content, the kind you couldn't fake. Inside, the house felt too still, like it was bracing. Martha was hosting a small backyard get-together. Sam grilled burgers. Ellie balanced a spritzer in one hand and a crossword in the other. Robbie tuned the old radio near the patio. No one noticed David slip back through the side entrance. He'd shown up late, uninvited, with a bottle of mediocre wine and a diplomatic smile. He'd made a show of pretending to help in the kitchen, then wandered down the hall like he was looking for a restroom. What he was looking for sat in the center of the living room. Heavy, regal, impossibly obvious. Legacy secured. The engraving read. He stared at it for a beat, listening to the hum of conversation outside. Then he reached behind the bookshelf where the extra keys hung on a hook she hadn't moved in years. The safe clicked open. Cold air hissed outward. Only one item sat inside. A manila envelope, aged slightly, the corners sealed with a wax emblem she must have pressed herself. Across the front, in Martha's unmistakable hand, in case of entitlement, he turned it over. No additional instructions, no legal jargon, just him and whatever secrets she was petty enough to store in this fortress. He hesitated, briefly, then tore the flap clean open. Inside was nothing. No check, no document, just a folded white slip. He unfolded it. Typed, centered. You joked. I remembered. Below it, taped with surgical precision, was a single candle. David stared. The silence stretched, then it shattered. Are you kidding me? He hissed, voice rising as he crumpled the note and hurled it across the room. You spiteful controlling. He grabbed the lamp from the console table and threw it against the wall. Shards scattered like guilt. He swiped everything off her desk, ceramic mugs, pens, frames, slamming them to the hardwood like punishment. The room grew hot with his rage. His face flushed, chest heaving. In that moment, he wasn't a man wronged, he was a child denied candy. The fireplace caught his eye. Still hot from earlier that morning, its embers dim but alive. He reached down, grabbed the envelope and remaining contents, and shoved them in. The flames took quickly. The wax hissed, the candle popped. By the time the door creaked behind him, he was wiping his hands on his pants, chest still heaving. Sam stood there, framed in the hallway's fading light. No expression, just stillness, the kind that said everything. David tried to speak, but no sound came out. Sam didn't give him the chance. He turned and walked away without a word. Outside, Martha sipped lemonade and smiled at something. Robbie said, her eyes crinkled at the edges, genuinely relaxed. She hadn't felt peace like this in years. But when she stepped back inside to grab a tray of glasses, she felt it instantly. The air off. The stillness wasn't calm now. It was smothered. She turned the corner. The study looked like a crime scene. Books thrown, a vase shattered, her safe wide open like a gutted animal. And in the fireplace, ash curled upward from the faint outline of the envelope's remains. No signature, no redemption, just flame. She didn't scream, didn't cry. Instead, she bent down, picked up the charred slip of paper, and read the only part still legible. You joked. She folded it gently, placed it on her mantel beside the brass photo of her and Sam at the beach, and straightened the picture slightly. Outside, the wind picked up. They saved him a chair last year, polished, padded prime spot at the head of the table. He filled it with swagger, a champagne flute, and a joke sharp enough to scar. This year, Martha left it empty on purpose. Her 74th birthday arrived without fanfare. No mailed invitations, no RSVPs, beyond a quiet nod from those who mattered. The morning was crisp and clear, the sky scrubbed clean after last night's thunderstorm. Sunlight filtered through her kitchen window, casting slow-moving stripes across the checkered tile. Everything smelled like cinnamon, citrus oil, and lemon zest. She didn't wear pearls this time. Just a soft navy sweater, and her favorite house loafers. Comfort mattered more now than ceremony. Power didn't need a costume. By 11, the garden had been set. Folding tables draped in cotton throws, mismatched chairs brought from her attic and sunroom. Each one held a name card, written in Martha's handwriting. Elle and Robbie, Sam, Nora, and Joyce, from her book club, plus B, the retired nurse who lived 3 doors down. No David, no Lay, and no one dared mention them. Robbie arrived first, lugging an old speaker system and a playlist full of vintage soul and jazz. Let's skip the Bluetooth, he said, plugging in an aux cord. Digital's too cold for a day like this. Martha smiled. So is silence. Ellie rolled in next, armed with a bottle of elderflower cordial and a toast rehearsed in the car. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and low heels that hadn't seen daylight in years. I wanted to look like I gave a damn, she said, hugging Martha tight. Success, Martha replied, pulling her close. And your earrings match the wine. Sam came last on time, of course, with a bakery box in one hand and a hand-carved wooden cake server in the other. Didn't trust myself with icing, he said, handing it over. But I figured I could handle oak. The cake was lemon chiffon with blueberry compote, Martha's favorite. Sam placed it at the center of the table and sat beside her like a sentry. The music hummed. Bees bobbed lazily around the lavender hedge. Laughter rose in soft waves, not performative, but real. When Ellie stood with her glass and cleared her throat, the music dipped to a whisper. To Martha she began, who redefined the word legacy, not with inheritance or charity, but with sheer unflinching clarity, and lemon curd. Everyone chuckled. Ellie raised her glass higher. To knowing who you are, and who never deserved a seat at your table in the first place. Martha met her gaze and clinked lightly. I'll drink to that. No one asked why David wasn't there. Not even Leah, who had sent a lukewarm text that morning. Hope today's nice. Let us know if you're doing anything. Martha hadn't replied, and Leah didn't follow up. After the cake was cut, Sam did the honors, slow and deliberate. Martha leaned toward him and slid a small object into his hand. A key, bronze, cool to the touch, attached to a single tag, DN, behind bookcase. He looked at her, puzzled. That safe's yours now, she said softly. It holds the only version of the will that matters. Sam's brow furrowed. I thought you already. She shook her head. This version has no clauses, no traps, no conditions. It's just truth. Yours to guard. He blinked, holding the key like it might disappear. Why me? Because you were the only one who never asked for anything, she said. And the only one who showed up. He didn't speak, just nodded, eyes a little shinier than before. Later, after everyone left and the last teacup had been washed, Martha sat in the den with a book on her lap and her hands folded over the cover. The safe stood in the corner, bolted, quiet. Inside, a single document in a leather folder. Across the front, in clean, unshakable script, final version. No conditions. The sun rose slow and gold, slipping over the trees like a secret returning to be told. The porch swing creaked gently beneath Martha and Sam, as they watched the light spill across the lawn, catching dew on the grass, like diamonds flung from a shaken hand. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug, the ceramic warm against her skin. Her knees ached less this morning. Her shoulders, too. Maybe it was the weather. Or maybe it was the weight she no longer carried. Still here, she said, her voice low used. Sam smirked without looking at her. They weren't wrong about the puff, though. You barely got those candles last year. I had 73 reasons not to try harder, she replied. And they both laughed. The porch smelled of morning damp wood, honeysuckle, and the faint trace of the lemon oil Robbie used to seal the new railing he installed last week. Birds chirped, somewhere a dog barked, and the world sounded like it was taking a clean breath. You know, Sam said. They emailed me, a real estate firm, asking if I was authorized to speak on behalf of the Caldwell estate. Martha snorted. Tell them the Caldwell estate only takes calls from kind people. Already did, Sam said, tapping the side of his phone. Blocked, twice. Down by the mailbox stood a new brass plaque. It read, Aging with Dignity Fund, Scholarship Partner Site, in honor of Martha Caldwell, founder, advocate, fire starter. The first 5 scholarships had already been awarded. 2 to nursing students, 1 to a single mother pursuing an online law degree, and 2 to high school seniors who'd written essays titled Respect Starts at Home and My Grandma's Stronger Than Yours. Martha hadn't cried reading those essays, but Ellie had, quietly, in the corner of the office, before excusing herself to get some air. She'd retired that summer, closed her practice after 4 decades, and named Martha as trustee to her advocacy grant. I trust no one else not to burn the paperwork or burn a hole through the guilty, Ellie had said. Which in your case might be the same thing. The house felt different now. Peaceful. Not waiting for a knock or dreading a text. Robbie still stopped by weekly to check the gutters and the crawl space. Sam visited often, but never out of guilt, only out of choice. They ate grilled cheese and watched documentaries. He played her jazz on his headphones and taught her how to use Spotify without cursing. David had moved out of state. He didn't send a forwarding address. No one asked. The last correspondence he'd received from Martha was the legal notice confirming full revocation of his interest in the estate, emotionally and financially. No contest allowed. No further comment made. The man who once held a cake like a weapon now lived in a rental outside Tampa. One mutual friend had called to mention he was trying to rebrand himself, but Martha didn't care. She'd finally realized the truth. When someone can't see you clearly, even absence won't correct their vision. And she had other things to build. Sam leaned back on the swing and looked at her sideways. You never told me, he said. Did you actually make a wish that day? You know, the birthday. Martha sipped her coffee slowly. The heat lingered on her tongue, the silence hanging between them like fresh laundry in sunlight. She looked out over her yard, the bees hovering around the lavender, the morning stretching wide and endless, and let the answer settle in her chest. Then she turned, calm and clear. Yes, she said. I wished he'd finally see who I really was. She paused. Let it land. Let the truth fill the space he had once occupied. And I made sure the world saw her too.